Reggie, we've been having lots of conversations over the past couple of weeks about race relations and talking about it as a family, talking about it with your children. And today I wanted to ask you if you would give us your thoughts about talking to your children about all the things that have been going on and just how to think through talking with your kids about a subject that for some may be very uncomfortable.
Yes, and there are, I think, some things for us to think about because it can be uncomfortable. But the goal, I think, is making sure that we are not avoiding the issue with our children.
Yes.
They're growing up in this world, and
Right.
they are forming thoughts and identities and perspectives and opinions. And what we don't want to do is leave them to the world to figure it out.
For sure. Yes. Great point.
um, Yeah. And so I know the first thing that I encourage anybody to do that I have to think about is just starting with me. What is my perspective? Like, how do I view, and this time we're talking about how do I view people that are not African American, are not Black? How does a white person, how do they view Black people? How do they view, other people from different racial backgrounds, ethnicities? And what does that look like in how we're interacting and how we're going about our daily lives?
Yeah, boy. So important because I think sometimes we don't think about that. We know it's there, but we just don't think about how much it impacts the way that we behave, even not even the words we say, just how we behave, which our kids are watching us all the time. So they're taking it in.
Well, and to your point, is because it becomes so subconscious,
Mhm.
little things that we just, whether it's take for granted or to your point, just don't think about.
Mhm.
Um, where we go to school, where we go to church, where we do anything, where we eat at, what restaurants we eat at, what TV shows are we watching. All now is the time to just sit back and really highlight those things and just do some introspective
Yeah.
as we think about talking to our children.
And so once you've done that, um, what would you say would be a great starting point for conversation with your children? And obviously, we're talking age appropriate. You have 7 children, and they range in age from teenagers to a little baby. But how would you encourage parents to go about beginning that conversation?
I think first is to figure out what or where does your child's frame of reference really come from.
Hmm.
Is all they've seen is what's on TV and media,
Hmm.
and the TV and media they watch, is there diversity in that? Are they interacting with people of a different race and ethnicity at school, for instance?
Hmm.
Or, for some, the current news cycle with the protest and media coverage is that might be their first high-end view of racial differences.
Yeah.
And so finding out what they know and what they're seeing and the question that they have can provide some really good jumping off points.
Yeah. You know, it occurs to me, I was talking with a friend. Our neighbor is African American. Our daughter and her son grew up together from the time they were babies. They've just always been together and been friends. And she said, it occurred to me that I never had a conversation about race with him, but overarchingly, my goal was to make sure that he was always in a diverse environment. Like, I didn't want him always with Black children or to be the only Black child in the room. I wanted there to be diversity. But she said it occurred to me that I never defined that for him. And so, what do you think about just even defining what race, racism, hypocrisy, those kinds of things? What do you think about that?
What's really interesting is so many kids have seen people get mistreated.
Yeah.
And 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 that, I think, even in our house, with me and my children, and whether they've seen it or not, they know people that have. But by and large, I mean, we've had conversations. They've seen where someone mistreated. Maybe, maybe it wasn't because of their race. Maybe it was because of, they may have had a special need, and so they were mistreated for that. Or maybe their size. Maybe they were smaller than everyone else, or taller or bigger than everybody else, whatever. And so to begin to think that, all right, anytime someone is not treated fairly and like they are of equal value, then, that's discrimination, right? And so then when that happens because of the color of someone's skin, now we've shifted into not just discrimination, but racism. And I think that's something bite-sized that children can understand and begin to connect dots when and if they see that in their world.
So teachable moments is basically what you're talking about, is pointing them out, not letting them actually just fly by without saying, hey, wait a minute, what did you just see there?
Yes. And, it's funny because I've known some parents that their kids will say, they'll say little things like, man, people were picking on, Johnny at school today. And then, well, as a parent, that becomes a really good opportunity to begin to ask questions.
Yeah.
Now, why do you think they were picking on Johnny? Is there anything that's different about Johnny that causes people to, see him differently and see him as, as not equal or not as good as them? Or is it something that makes them fear Johnny? And so from there, what happens? Now we can begin to help kids see, oh, so that's what racism looks like, or any kind of ism that we have. So they grow up in an atmosphere where now they know, oh, I can have eyes for that. And what I'm seeing isn't right. And my parents have helped me to name it.
When you think about that, just makes me, I guess, go in two directions. One is teaching children about celebrating differences. I can remember growing up. I mean, my brother had lots of special needs. He was clearly different than everybody else, and he got picked on just mercilessly. And it makes you want to take action and do something. But I think a lot of times, especially children, they don't know what to do. So how do we teach our children to celebrate different versus being intimidated by it or fearful of it, and then also to take action?
Yes. It's funny that you say that. When it comes to the celebration piece, I think there's two pieces that we really can hone in on. One is, look, whether it's cultural festivals or, going out and, me and my kids, that used to be our weekend activities, whether it was a Hispanic festival, a German festival, an Asian festival. We just love to go and experience just other cultures. When I lived in Nashville, we had an African Street Festival once a year, for instance, where you see people from all over come to it. And during that, I think it helps you gain an appreciation for the differences.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's just because you're seeing the best of the differences, but you're enjoying them. You're enjoying whether it's the dance, the food, the language, just all of this culture may have to offer. I think the other part is we've got to, if we're not having dinners with people that aren't like us, if we're not, socializing and going into their world, bringing them into our world, sharing worlds, where we then are able to highlight the differences and how much richer our lives are because of the interaction, because of the fellowship. And I think that makes it, when kids do that, when families do that, I think it makes it easier to say, look, to my daughter, Michaela, when you see somebody being bullied, when you see maybe somebody's making fun of, her hair or her friend's hair because it's different. And, it might be for her, it might be a cultural expression.
Right.
But while others, they see it as quote unquote ugly. There's a confidence that you can have, that your child can have, to stand up for that person, or at the very least begin to befriend that person. When that kid is getting bullied at school, to, be the one to eat, be the one to sit with them, be the one to come into their world and show them that they have value. And then as parents, when our kids do that, we've got to affirm and celebrate them. Like, that's a good job that you did. And then see, how can we support in that case, their activism.
Yeah. What about, I think for some people, they may be sitting here saying, I don't have any close Black friends, or I don't have any close white friends. And I'm really intimidated about the idea of approaching someone. I mean, what if they say to me, that's your job to learn, or you need to figure that one out? I think some people are just a little bit standoffish about what is my next step if I just honestly don't know someone that I feel close enough to that I could go and have a conversation with and say, can you help me?
Yes. And I think part of it, we start with making sure we give people the opportunity to know that we're not all at the same place. And just because you're now ready to really learn and to really expose yourself doesn't mean every person you run into is willing and ready, because we don't know people's baggage, their history, their experiences. And so I think that mindset kind of helps. And then I think the other part is, when we think about some of the places that we already attend, do I need to add something to that? Do I need to go to, whether it's, a movie theater is opening? I think of sometimes when the movie Black Panther came out. And so, the Black community went to see Black Panther in droves. That's an opportunity to go, because now you have a point of conversation,
right,
that you can have. Because, what you don't want to do is go and say, hi, you're a white person, I want to get to know you. That's not genuine. Or it may come from a place of sincerity, but it doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
But to all I saw Black Panther, what do you think of that?
Yeah. And it does occur to me that you may not know anybody that you feel close enough to ask that question to, but you might have friends that do, and you could ask them, hey, is there any way that we could have a get together so that we could have some opportunity for some conversation?
Exactly. And to that point, I'm really convinced, and I've seen it so many times, when you really desire to learn, then doors and opportunities begin to open up, as long as you continue to stay diligent. Yeah. It may not happen in your first effort, but it'll happen.
Yeah. So I hear you saying we need to do self-examination. We need to figure out where we're coming from, what our experiences have been growing up before we start having conversations with our children. Once we have done that, though, we need to consider age-appropriate conversations. And we say conversations with an S because what you're saying is it's not once and done. It's an ongoing dialogue really throughout life, kind of like being a lifelong learner, understanding about different cultures and where people are coming from and how we engage, and then being active about pursuing relationship with those who are different from you, and exposing your children to things like cultural festivals to help make that happen. And then even taking, maybe not being put off. Maybe you do engage with someone who isn't very open to the idea of the ongoing dialogue, but that doesn't mean you stop and shut down. You figure out other ways to open doors for there
Yeah,
to be helpful, educational, back and forth conversation.
exactly. Exactly. And to add to that, I think with our children, we have to be willing to learn with them.
Oh, yeah.
So often we do as parents, we think we got to go learn it, and
Yeah.
it doesn't have to be that way.
Yeah.
This may be new ground for us as a family,
Mhm.
and it's fun. It can become fun and educational to dive in and learn with our children,
Mhm.
um, and in that, keeping in mind the principles that are important to our family.
Yeah. I think one of the most powerful things that you said was the idea of helping your child to process if they come home, like not missing the teachable moment of seeing maybe somebody was hurt or bullied, treated not very nicely, and your child is clearly, they're aware, they're compassionate, and helping them to see you're not helpless in that. You actually can take action, and I I love that.
And that works when you set a standard in your house. And as parents, my kids know treating someone with of less, as though they have less value, treating someone without respect
Mhm.
is not tolerated. Like,
Yeah.
you just can't, and that's the standard, that's the expectation. And it's amazing how they begin to value that themselves.
Yeah.
And when they are the right characteristics to have,
Yeah.
then they want to share that with others. And sometimes for some of our kids, we're gonna have to pull them back now because they're gonna want to,
Yeah.
go above and beyond, and it's a good thing. But it can become a little dance for those that want to be, super activists as a 8-year-old, those who are trying to figure out if it's okay.
I love the story. I saw a story earlier in the week of a teenage girl who went and just decided to cook for the police officers. She's African American, and she said, I wanted to do something. I felt like this was something I could do, and it was my way of participating in what's happening and engaging in conversation. And I thought, good for you. That's young and doing something. I think we're talking about legacy building here for the future so that we don't repeat mistakes that have been made.
Well, we're at a time where African Americans are screaming to know that they're valued, to
Yes.
know that they're seen, to know that they're heard, to know they bring something to the table.
Right.
But I think in that point that you just talked about, that story, that little girl knows she has value,
Yes. Yes.
and so she's bringing her value to make this world better by just engaging in conversation and serving others.
Yeah. And
It's
imagine if, yeah, it's so powerful. I mean, imagine if we all did that and we all understood. I mean, it was the given that we all have value. And I think in the perfect world, we know that. We just have to live that and help people. We need to take action to help people know, yes, you have value no matter who you are.
Yes, and it starts at home. It starts with the family, and it
Right.
starts with how we teach our own children their own value.
Yeah.
And admittedly, in our home, we're having a lot of conversations just to make sure that they don't ever feel like they're not of value because of anything about
Right.
them, whether it's just race or anything else.
Yeah.
But what you receive, you want them to be willing to give out, and I think that's what we want all of our children to do.
Yes, yes. Thank you so much. This has been a great conversation, and I appreciate your transparency and all that you are saying, because I think we can all embrace it and we can all do something.
Yes. Well, thank you. This has been fun.